Can you read the fourth verse of the Legge? I have in Crowley's, all things arise without diffidence. They grow and none interferes. They change according to their natural order without lust of result. The work is accomplished, yet it continues in its orbit without goal. This work is done unconsciously. This is why its energy is indefatigable.
Yeah, and that's a very strong Crowley concept that comes up again and again as well. The idea that, if something is doing its will, then, like, if the organs of the body are doing their will, then they are doing so silently and you are unaware of them. But when you become aware of them, that means that there is something wrong. But I will read the James Legge version of that passage. All things spring up, and there is not one which declines to show itself. They grow, and there is no claim made for their ownership. They go through their processes, and there is no expectation of a reward for the results. The work is accomplished, and there is no resting in it as an achievement.
Yeah, so that's not bad.
There's actually a little poetic phrase tagged onto that as well. The work is done, but how, no one can see. 'Tis this that makes the power not cease to be. I don't like his poetry, to be honest. Try, James Legge, try.
Yeah. Maybe being a sinologist is not a prerequisite for being
Cinesinologist, maybe.
Great poet. This is one of the things that makes me skeptical about this as a better Taoist book than the James Legge version, because it's funny. Crowley's so radical in so many places, but there are some times, especially when he's interpreting the philosophy of other people, that he seems to take the easiest out, and whether he's wrong or he's right about the interpretation of the Chinese, the fact that it seems so easy makes me wonder why we need his translation. Because there's a radical version of this that says doing nothing actually is going to accomplish work, and that seems just wrong on its face. But it's sort of what the text points at in a lot of places. And I think the radicalness of that idea is part of what makes it interesting. Be like water, the Bruce Lee thing that we're familiar with. It's like, it's not don't be strong or don't, it's like just be responsive, don't have goals, like, don't try to win the fight, just move, in your environment. So in some places in the Tao Te Ching, it really says, like, do nothing, minimize friction, don't accomplish stuff. Whereas Crowley comes up with this, puts in his idea of lust of result, where you still have to work. You have to work very, very hard. You just don't work with a lot of hope of accomplishment. You work with an enjoyment of doing work. And it's not, to me, a clearly right interpretation of the text. It just seems to be what Lao Tzu must mean if you try to reference his advice to your own experience. It's the easiest possible interpretation, and I don't understand why Crowley thinks it's so radical, or why we needed this.
And I guess to some extent that's the important thing for us to keep our minds on is what it meant to Crowley and how that informs his philosophies and his way of doing things, because we are not going to get the ancient Chinese perspective on this. Because I mean, briefly looking at the ancient Chinese perspective on this, just at a guess, I would imagine if you're going to be talking about how to govern a people, it would make sense from the point of view of, I don't even know when Lao Tzu is around, to be honest with you, offhand, but I'm guessing it would have been at a time when there would have been a lot more unstable situations going on around various states in the country at the time. And I would see where, okay, if you're going to be governing a people, you will have governors, people taking charge who are going to be warlords, and they're going to be embroiling things into, they're going to be using things to go after personal glory, personal gain. You're going to have difficulties keeping the peace and keeping the peace with neighboring states and that sort of thing. So from that perspective, I can see where it would make a lot of sense to minimize the amount of friction going on in your state and in neighboring states, and that this kind of advice can be very useful to keep in the forefront of your mind as a governor in that kind of situation. Taking it to an extreme from a completely different point of view in a completely different time and place may just not line up.
Darkly Splendid Abodes. Released at midnight on the first and third Fridays each month. And available on Spotify and various other streaming services.